Have you ever thought about buying your business from your boss? Well, as it turns out, in the States, one company just did exactly that. Now, interestingly, this article in the BBC I'm looking at, Why I Sold My Business to My Staff, is not actually an uncommon practice. You'll find various different schemes whereby employees can gain shares in the business itself, but also there are various schemes where actually management can take over complete ownership as well, not just some sort of motivational tool, as it were. So there are various schemes, for instance, where an employee will own shares in a company as long as they stay with the company. Now, the benefit of something like that is if the company goes to an IPO, which is an initial public offering, whereby the shares are traded publicly, like what Elon Musk did recently with SpaceX, then the employee's shareholding goes up by quite a bit and they can cash out potentially at that point. So that's what those sorts of schemes are for. Now, in this particular article, the owner was looking to retire and they wanted to keep those who worked for the company, interested in continuing to run it, and didn't want to create any redundancies or have to try and put, labour overseas in order to reduce the running costs. Now, you can have a read through this article on the BBC itself, but essentially what it is this MBO, this management buyout, or also a LBO, which is a leverage buyout. And what that means is that the management team effectively, as well as the other employees, depending on the specific structure, go on to continue to own this business. So how do you actually go and do that as an owner? How do you sell it to your employees? What if your employees don't actually have the cash to do it? Now, some employees may have some money set aside that they're able to actually buy shares with. So how does the owner actually get any form of income? Well, again, it really depends on the structure, but ultimately there will be a mixture of how, should we call it, debt is raised. Now, raising debt basically means going to the bank and getting the equivalent of a mortgage based on how well a business runs. Now, this is not really that different from the way a lot of property deals are done, but you're effectively looking at this trading history of the company and saying that based on the strengths of this, then we would like to borrow against that. That goes to pay the owner some of the money that they need in order to remove themselves from the company. And then the other part of it is that you typically do some sort of earn-out tied to KPIs, which is where you say to the owner, okay, look, you're helping that handover to our management. If somebody needs to be promoted to fill your spot, then give them all the running of the day-to-day, and then the owner's able to step aside. And that could take months, it could take years to do that sort of process. It really just depends on who's already there, who already knows the job inside and out. So typically, of course, with the bank funding, they're going to want to know who's going to run the business so that the expertise is there, so they can basically place their bets on the company and say, okay, we genuinely think that this is going to be able to continue running in the fashion it has done, if not better, given that this management team is in place. So this allows the owner to step back. Now, the thing is that if the company doesn't perform terribly well, then the owner might take a hit on that. They might not necessarily get all the money that they had hoped for. So there's actually another thing that they can do, which is called vendor finance. Now, vendor finance comes in various forms. You could link what I just mentioned in with vendor finance, but ultimately you can treat it like a firm mortgage with the owner who's left. So what happens is you say, well, look, we owe you X amount for the business. We guarantee you that we're going to continue paying you that amount, no matter what happens with the business. So they effectively would then be next in line after what they'd call the senior debt, which is effectively the bank, as to who get paid what, depending on how the business performs. So you can do a mixture of, effectively borrowing from the owner. The owner can also earn money from a KPI-based earn-out, and they can also get a lump sum, which is basically paid to them from the bank, and the bank takes, an interest, as it were, or a charge over the company in exchange for that. There is, of course, another option, which is you can either continue to use that bank lending, or you can have an external investor come in and provide money in order to help buy out that owner. So with them, of course, they take on shares also. And this is where you're normally talking about a mixture of equity raise, which is external investors who are putting their money in exchange for shares. You're looking at debt raise, which is either from the vendor themselves, as well as debt raise from institutions such as banks as well. So that's how something like this gets done, and it's more common than you think. Now, a lot of businesses don't actually end up getting sold. They end up getting wound down, or perhaps their assets being sold off or being asset stripped as such, and that's the end of it. So owners really only have a limited number of ways in which that they can sell their business on, and something whereby they work with the existing management and give them shares in it is a great way to do it. Now, truth be told, is an external investor coming in, they might just simply want to own the company, and they might say, look, I don't want to be managing this day to day, in which case they're relying on that management team to be able to know what they're doing in order to keep that company running. Now, that external investor who comes in, they of course want that management team to be incentivized. So they, as part of coming on board, might say, well, actually, I want the management to have some shares in the company as well, so they're also invested, strengthening the case that that management team is going to take the business forward. So quite often you'll end up with some sort of equivalent of this structure in one way or another. Now, of course, this stuff isn't taught in schools, and it's not taught to employees. It's not really taught to employers either until it comes down to crunch time. But it is really worthwhile having an understanding of these sorts of structures, because as an investor, you might want to invest in a deal. You might have your own business and you're thinking of selling that business. And you might think, well, what are my different options to doing that? And this is a great strategy as well. So while this has made headlines, it is not outside of the norm of typical business selling and acquisitions. So interesting read anyway. As I said, it was today in the BBC. Interesting that it popped up, and have a read through. If there's anything in the article as well that you want a specific question answered about, or what my thoughts are on it, then just drop me a comment in the comment section below. Have a read and let me know your thoughts.